Hi, welcome to Operation Fishing Freedom. I'm Ben Olson. Today it's our privilege to be fishing with U.S. Navy veteran and USS Cole survivor Keith Lorensen.
Military veterans protect our great nation. Pro anglers Jay Garstecki and Ben Olson made it their duty to honor our heroes. They want to share soldiers' stories. The perfect place to carry out this mission? A fishing boat. Get ready to launch Operation Fishing Freedom. Brought to you by Great Clips.
Today's guest, United States Navy veteran Keith Lorensen, is no stranger to water.
The time I spent away while I was in the Navy, I never did much fishing.
Well, you ready to get after some smallmouth?
Yeah.
Or to fishing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It is a passion of mine. My first memories as a young kid in Pennsylvania were carrying my fishing pole and my way oversized tackle box with more than I needed inside it. Walking down to the creek, which seemed like miles, but it was probably about a half a mile to the creek and then to the neighbor's pond. I would spend a lot of time by myself fishing.
Keith joined the Navy at a young age. A recruiter took notice of his intelligence after Keith scored highly on the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery.
The results came back and the recruiter said, "Hey, you're a pretty smart guy."
Keith would spend the next 6 years working on gas turbine engines. Before long, Keith rose up in the ranks, earning an offer he could not refuse.
And then a former recruiter talked to me about, "Oh, why don't you just go home, man? You can recruit out of your hometown and still be in the Navy and won't have to worry about getting a job." So then I was an enlisted recruiter out of Hopkins, Minnesota.
Keith moved back to his home state of Minnesota and started a family.
I met my wife early on when I came back for recruiting duty. Without knowing what the future was going to be like, you know, that's one of the risks that everybody takes when they raise their right hand is, you know, you're going to serve and defend the Constitution, not thinking that you're going to be put in harm's way.
After several years as a recruiter, Keith moved back to Virginia, where he'd find a new crew.
After recruiting duty, I reported to my first ship as a chief, and because of my young looks, they called me the kid. And so that stuck with me till about the end of my career. We were going to do a 6-month cruise in the Mediterranean. Halfway over to the Straits of Gibraltar, we declared war and called it Desert Storm. And so our plans were shifted. Instead of going to the Mediterranean, we were going to transit through the Mediterranean and then go up into the Persian Gulf and provide support for the Wisconsin and the Missouri, which was pretty historic.
Historic. See, this would be the first time since World War II that these massive battleships had been deployed together.
Very impressive. You're sailing next to those ships and you knew that you were going to be seeing some action. We're going to be launching some artillery, and who knows how long that was going to last. Our objective was to clear the minefields because there had been mines laid in the Persian Gulf. Our explosive ordnance detachment team, and they pulled the cables free and the mines free, and then we would sail away from them a few hundred yards and then we'd detonate them. So at that point, it was pretty real.
Keith would spend several months escorting the battleships before being reassigned. His new ship, the USS Cole.
Every experience I had with members from the Cole was like, wow, those guys act a little bit differently. I mean, walked a little straighter, their haircut was always top notch, their uniforms were always sharp, and they would always greet you with, you know, the professional military courtesies. I thought, man, that must be a good team there.
A ship that would soon develop a history all its own.
Operation Fishing Freedom is brought to you by Great Clips, Recon Boats, and by Evinrude Outboards.
If you'd like to get some cool Operation Fishing Freedom gear,
Or simply make a donation so that we can take more veterans fishing.
log on to our website, operationfishingfreedom.com.
Oh yeah, that's a beauty.
But it's a fighter.
Well, that's a little guy with a lot of heart.
Heart, a word that chronicles much of Keith's life in different ways and different colors.
Keith, this is on Mille Lacs, this picture.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Like any sailor, Keith has a crew, both on the water and at home.
My family is my support network. They are my rock.
Inside boxes, books, and photo albums, Keith's legacy lives on, including that of one particular historic ship.
One of the ones was the Cole. And I was like, yeah, I'll take that ship.
Keith had observed the Cole in the past and found himself quite impressed with the crew.
Those guys act a little bit differently. I mean, they walked a little straighter, their haircut was always top notch, their uniforms were always sharp, and they would always greet you with, you know, the professional military courtesies. I thought, must be a good team there, and it was a newer ship.
With Keith's heart set on the Cole, he deployed. Just months into his work, Keith and the crew arrived at Aden, Yemen on October 12th, 2000.
October 12th, we were due to pull in to Aden, Yemen. We're going to get some fuel to continue on through the Persian Gulf. Our mission was to provide presence in the Persian Gulf. So along the way, we had stopped, we went through the Red Sea, and we're going to stop in Aden, Yemen, pick up about 200,000 gallons of diesel fuel. And once you anchor, you start shutting stuff down and setting up for refueling. And so we didn't think there was anything to be nervous about. A couple crew members were watching a movie. I think we were having fajitas. So about 3 of us sitting at one table, got ready to finish, and last thing I remember, I was standing, I was going to get up. I never got up. What is that noise, you know? And it was a little bit louder than what the speakers would have been able to produce, and so, what is that noise? And that was the last sound we heard.
Operation Fishing Freedom is brought to you by Great Clips, SKB Cases, and by St. Croix Rods.
We at Operation Fishing Freedom are not the only ones who appreciate Keith's service.
Who wants their children to get tattoos, right? And she said, Dad, I want to get a tattoo of your ship. And I was like, okay, that's flattering. Are you sure you want to do that? And she says, I have to do that. That's something I want to do. So she had a tattoo of the USS Cole on her forearm. Yeah, it's humbling.
If you'd like to see more behind-the-scenes footage and bonus content,
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. If you're a U.S. military veteran living in Illinois, Wisconsin, or Minnesota,
log on to takeavetfishing.org to find an event near you.
Our chief, Keith Lorensen, is a textbook optimist.
Somebody said to me one time that calm seas make terrible sailors. So the alternative is really rough seas. Kind of demonstrates who you are and what you're capable of doing.
It was on October 12th, the year 2000, that Keith learned what a strong crew is truly capable of.
About 3 of us sitting at one table, got ready to finish, and the last thing I remember, I was standing, I was going to get up. I never got up. We heard a noise on the other side of the wall, and that was the last sound we heard.
A group of terrorists on a small boat full of explosives pulled up alongside the hull of the USS Cole, right outside the chief's mess, where lunch was being served.
The next thing I knew, I was laying on my back under some debris. I had been pushed from where I was standing all the way over to, there's a serving line, all stainless steel, kind of like you'd see in a cafeteria. So I was underneath this equipment. Glass was still falling from the light fixtures that were broken. So I know I hadn't lost consciousness for any significant time. And it was pitch black. All the lights were out, even the battle lanterns that typically illuminate like exit doors, those were all mispositioned. It was smoky and completely quiet.
A quiet made cold by the lack of light, the empty echo of a broken ship.
So as I'm laying there, I wasn't in any pain. I was just kind of, in shock still. I knew I was bleeding. I didn't know where from. I had put my hand down and held it in front of my face. Couldn't see anything, so I took a flashlight off my belt. Turned it on and I could see that I was bleeding. It's like, okay, well that's not good. So I took my belt off and tied a tourniquet around as high as I could on my right thigh. And then just held it there and held constant pressure on my femoral artery.
In his mind and in his heart, Keith's crew kept him alive.
I have a pretty strong faith. I do a lot of praying, and I know my family prays for me when I'm away. I had a vision of my wife and 2 children in a black and white photograph that she had taken for me before we deployed. So I was concentrating on that photo. Without knowing what happened, I was determined to survive.
This week's nonprofit of the week, Take a Vet Fishing. Their mission is to provide one-day fishing events for veterans in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Go to their website for more information.
If you'd like to personally thank a vet that you saw in one of our episodes,
or nominate a veteran to be featured in a future episode,
log on to our website, operationfishingfreedom.com.
Operation Fishing Freedom is brought to you by Optima Batteries, Power Pole, and by Temple Bay Lodge.
The attack on the Cole left a 40-foot wide hole in the left side of the hull, just outside where Keith Lorensen and crew were eating lunch. Only one thing remained in his mind as he tended to the wounds in the silent darkness: his family.
One by one, they started to evacuate. There's 13 of us in the chief's mess. It started to get a little bit quieter in there. And then it started to get real quiet, and I was the last one in there. So I took the flashlight and I was holding it up as I heard the voices, and they came, and the guy said, "That's the only thing we saw was that little light shining."
The blast almost cost him his leg, but The crew of the Cole left no sailor behind. After a few days and a number of surgeries, Keith awoke to a familiar face.
I was coming out of anesthesia, and my wife was sitting there on the bed. She had the list of all those that were missing or known that were fatalities. She's like, do you want to know? I was like, well, yeah, I do. I mean, that was, I would say that was one of the toughest parts. I was hearing her, list off those names. Most of the ones that were killed were young people that worked for me, my boss, and then a fellow chief that was in the chief's mess with me.
Crew members, a second family, lives that would never be forgotten. Lives of those who, like Keith, had two crews, one on the water and the other at home.
She says, the president's going to have a ceremony in Norfolk. I was like, well, that's nice. Nice of him to think of us, and that's pretty honorable. And she says, I think we need to get you home. So she said, what do you think it would do for the morale of the crew if we could get a couple sailors home for that ceremony? So I think it'd be a very good idea if it's possible. So on this journey, 12 miles on the day of the ceremony, Lisa's in the ambulance with me. I got a couple naval officers and the medical staff. And Lisa's looking out of the back of the ambulance, and tears are running down her face. And I was like, is everything all right? Obviously, we've been through a lot. It's been pretty emotional last few days. I said, everything all right? She said, you would not believe what I'm seeing. I said, what's that? She said, there are people standing on the sidewalk, like shoulder to shoulder. She said, there are thousands of people, and they're all waving flags, and they've got signs, and it's amazing.
Standing in honor. A grateful nation. A country in mourning.
It was pretty somber. Some pictures of my wife and I shedding some tears during that ceremony.
We really appreciate you sharing your story with us and you giving back and keeping the memory of that day alive. And we have a little something for you. In honor of your service and what you've done to keep that memory alive, and we have this custom fishing rod we'd love to give you. Just a small token of our appreciation. It has the branches of the service on there, handcrafted for Keith Lorensen.
Wow.
And we also have your very own Keith Lorensen Operation Fishing Freedom jersey.
That is amazing. Thank you.
And we hope this helps keep that memory alive too. Thank you very much for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice and for the sacrifice of your shipmates.
Thank you very much.
A fishing rod and a reminder of Keith's crew.
And my wife was my savior. She helped me get through those difficult times and helped me realize that, hey, you're fighting for a reason.
Most importantly, Lisa reminded Keith of something all veterans must never forget. You're not alone. This message stuck with Keith, who now speaks at schools and ceremonies around the country to remind people of how important our veterans are, and also the respect they so deserve.
It might be just that one encounter with somebody that says, hey, thank you for your service, would change their outlook and give them a reason to work through and heal themselves and re-engage with their family. Don't be afraid to ask for that help, and don't be afraid to grab that hand, because there's a lot of people that care about you.
Keith's story serves as a reminder to veterans and civilians. We all have a crew, even in darkness. That crew will be there to pull you out. You just have to take a hand.
If you know a veteran you'd like to see featured on an upcoming episode, go to our website, operationfishingfreedom.com, and click on the Nominate button.